Welcome to another episode of Back and Forth with Blue Ridge Wealth Planners. My name is John Vandergriff. I'm one of the owners and wealth planners at Blue Ridge Wealth. I am joined, as always, by the infamous Zach Hill of, the dietary fame. Zach is the operations team lead and portfolio management team lead here at Blue Ridge Wealth Planners, also of Remedy Coffee. But again, we won't hit on that as much because we've got a lot to cover. We are going to talk with a more timely episode today, talking about the newly signed, newly passed, newly created, very long stimulus bill, and talk about how that compares to the last stimulus bill that we had, but also what are some advantages there, what are some responses with it. So we'll kind of go in several different angles with this today, but I think it'll be a good, complete discussion because there has been a lot of chatter on social media about this, and I don't know that it paints a full picture of what's really going on with the stimulus. And so, like we had just talked about before this, I think it's good to shine a light on, some of the areas that were positively impacted that need to be, but also obviously the,
right,
things that are a lot of junk that's in it as well. So.
Right, and that's you touched on it a little bit, the extremely long bill. So it's 5,000 pages or something around there. It is just insane. There's no way. If you started reading it when they wrote the bill, you might be done now.
Right. Yeah, and that's why attorneys have jobs
Exactly.
to make long documents that say very little. So, but as we look at that, I think the thing that we'll start with that I think a lot of people have already hit on is just the unnecessary, not even any part of coronavirus stuff that's in this plan, I think is something that we all agree should be done away with, but it's all a part of politics as we understand it because, for certain things to get pushed through, you've got to throw a bone to somebody else. And so there are a lot of passion projects that are in this bill that unfortunately got kind of thrown in to make something that I think is a very positive thing happen for a lot of people. But, sending money out the door to countries at, not greater amounts because, of this $900 billion, $166 billion is going toward the actual checks that are getting paid out.
Right.
And that's not counting, some people are saying, more countries are getting money than the American people. Not really.
Not quite.
It's
still the fact that you're talking about that in a, what was supposed to be a relief package for American citizens is already starting to gray that line a little bit where you're just like, why are we actually doing this? Because like you said, I know some people add things into the bill just to get it passed, but I was pulling this up because I think this is the most ridiculous section in the bill, which is Section 342 of the bill outlines a statement of policy regarding the succession or reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. Why is that in the COVID relief bill?
It's almost to a point now where people are just trying to put things in there that they just see what they can get away with. Like, oh, let's put this in here, just to see if anybody's reading this. It's kind of like when you had a term paper and you
yeah.
I didn't really do that because I liked making good grades, but, some people have been known to do that in the past. So
Right. But if you're talking about that during this bill, like you said, a significant portion of it is just going to the checks and giving Americans money. And there are a lot of programs that we're going to talk about that are positives for the economy and for the country and for the people. But the fact, we're sending so much money out the door to other countries. Those are valid criticisms. I think when you're talking about we waited. This is the first relief bill that we've had since we passed the original CARES Act in March.
Yeah.
That's crazy. We've gone this entire time and this entire year almost without any additional relief. So the fact that we're finally getting a relief package, but it's really convoluted and has a lot of money just to international countries. It has a lot of policies like that we just mentioned. It really, all those criticisms I do think are valid, but they do take away from some of the positives of the bill.
Yeah, and I think, just so that we can kind of move on to the good stuff, I think we would all agree that needs to be something that goes away. And so the only way we can really affect that is either personally running for political office or voting to remove systems that are in place like that. Right. It's not going to be anything that's going to affect, obviously, this bill or anything in the near future, but hopefully with seeing things like this and getting enough light shed on the negatives, then it'll start to curb some of that behavior.
Right.
So again, let's talk a little bit about the actual impact to most people. We'll talk about the checks first, and then we'll talk about the unemployment piece of that, how it compares, but also what people are actually getting.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, the first thing and the thing that gets all the headlines is Americans who had reported under $75,000 of gross income in 2019 are getting a check for $600. It's the same qualifications as we had in March, but the checks are half. We got $1,200 per person in March, and now you're getting $600. Additional boost is that families will get $600 per child.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a big boost to people who have children at home or have dependents that they claim. They'll get that extra $600. But that's money that they expect will start to be released in the next 2 weeks.
Yep.
So that is such a quick turnaround time from we're signing this bill. Trump signed the bill yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago, and then we're getting the checks 2 weeks later. That is a very quick cash injection into the pockets of American people. And
I think that was a big negative from the original CARES Act, is making it dependent on a tax form that most people hadn't done yet.
Right.
It was, and direct deposit information that could be outdated because it was not the most up to date, and then checks it was just a mess. And I think that hopefully, as we look to summarize a big part of this, hopefully this whole process that we're going through now learned from the mistakes of some of the previous where, as we look at money that's being injected back into the PPP, that whole process was just a money grab and there weren't really any rules. It was kind of the Wild West. And now that there's, some specifics in place, I think what you're seeing is they're in a very long-winded bill, starting to put some things in place that make more logical sense based on what we're seeing our needs from the coronavirus
like
fallout.
Giving money for children.
Yeah,
families who had children got the same amount and didn't get anything for the kids. And the kids, obviously, if you have a dependent, that creates a higher need for cash during a time when you probably needed it. So So I think you touched on that. And that was great. I think the checks are pretty cut and dry, so I think we can move on to kind of.
Yeah, and the only other thing is just I think the phase out, the way it works is like for every $100 that you make above 75, you get $5 taken away from your check. So if you're over 87, you don't get anything.
It's a gradual.
Or a 174 if you're married. So again, I think that's it. And then want to talk because that represents about 166 billion of the plan. Another 120 billion goes to unemployment benefits. And I think that is an improvement here. I still think based on what we talked about before, not attaching some kind of COLA adjustment for different places is a mistake, just because I know here in Tennessee, the $600 on top of the state's unemployment was ridiculous.
It was great. If you some people got a raise to go on unemployment, and then in New York, or like we talked about it, so much, where if you're in New York or San Francisco, a high rent city, that $600 didn't do as much. And then now they've cut it to $300. So maybe that's more manageable. Maybe that is more realistic for people in Tennessee. So you're not incentivized to quit or go on unemployment. But then in New York, that helps you even less.
Right. But I think from an economic standpoint, that gets some money to people that needs it, but it doesn't incentivize people to purposefully not try to work or, get off of those unemployment benefits. Because I know here locally, you had a lot of businesses that weren't able to get their workers back because,
Yeah, me. You joked about it, but I have personal experience with that at the coffee shop. Is we had 2 people who stayed on unemployment because it was better for them.
Yeah.
And so, I was like, of course you have to do that. Stay on unemployment. You would make more money doing that. And that's just a weird dichotomy to say, like, I need to come back to work, but it's better for you not to personally. So,
yeah.
But here's some stats that I found when we were kind of researching and reading through the bill and going through this is, like you said, you get an extra $300 per week for unemployment from the federal government through March 14th. That $600 per week ran out in July. So we haven't had any federal boost from the end of July till now, for the most part. But now we've got that extra $300 a week till March. One of the places that's really going to help is I saw this stat is that we have now have 4 million people who have been on unemployment for longer than 6 months.
Yeah.
And so when you get to that length of unemployment, that's a period where you're talking about real permanent job loss for a lot of people. And so this is really going to help those people. There's almost 21 million people total on unemployment, so this will definitely help them. But those people who are looking at potentially permanent job losses, because we'll talk. I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but you know, if you're in some kind of entertainment capacity where you ran a theater and the theater is now closed for good, or you had a restaurant. So many restaurants now are starting. We've seen them close over the last 6 or 8 months, and maybe that was your restaurant, and now you're on unemployment. And you're looking at permanent job loss or career change. That $300 a week is really going to go right into the pockets of those people.
Yeah. Well, and it's sad too, because I've seen, you know, some things on social media where New York has kind of instituted the can't eat inside at restaurants in the height of winter, you know, in Christmas season. And so you've got, you know, some places that do most of their business with parties and stuff that's just eliminated completely, and the to-go orders are not replacing it. And so it's one of those where, you know, I think having that built in there, having, you know, as we'll talk about kind of in the second half, some improvements and some parameters on the PPP to where the money can go to some of the hardest hit places, I think is a great improvement. But making sure that obviously, you know, as we look at this, we want to talk about what we're in line to get, but then what kind of decisions need to be made with that, because, you know, I talked about this on the radio that, you know, people are like, oh, big whoop, it's $600 each. But I would argue it's a bigger fundamental problem of just being a good steward of whatever you get, you know, because like some people, they will waste $6,000 just like they will waste $600, you know. So if you're not strategic in what you're going to use the money for, it's very easy for it and more money to fall out behind it, you know. And so trying to look at some options of what to do with this. And again, you know, timing is always key in conversations that you have with people where, you know, trying to make a good decision with $600 may lead to you making good decisions with much more money when it comes to creating plans. It's just about what is it that piques your interest and gets you motivated enough to make a decision that is beneficial that maybe you've been putting off for whatever reason. And so, you know, as we look at that, I think that's one of the positives that can come from this is obviously, you know, we're seeing from a market standpoint, markets respond when stimulus bills get passed because American people have more money, they need to spend it somewhere. But being strategic about how you use that money can have a very good ripple effect if you're aware that this is about more than just $600 per person. It's about making good financial decisions.
Right, and it's interesting, too, this is just a coincidence, but this money is coming at the start of a new year. So we're getting into an entirely new tax year where you have, you know, you potentially have more options to use this money than you would have had this money come in at the 1st of December or in this 2020 tax year.
Well, and also, too, I mean, it probably wasn't strategic because I think it was teamed with, like, the government shutdown and trying to organize that, but I think it is important that it happens after Christmas so that there's not stupid spending of
Christmas. I mean, that $600 would have gone to a Christmas gift right away.
Yeah, for someone themselves. There's great deals. And, you know, so, I mean, that's what we're talking about. Trying to make good decisions with your money is something that's evergreen. It bleeds into all areas, not just this check. And so that's the thing that we look forward to doing, you know, definitely on my team here at Blue Ridge Wealth is trying to walk people through those discussions to say, like, you know, you've got this account, but it's not just this account we need to look at. It's the whole picture. How does this fit into everything else? How does this fit into your future? And then trying to build a plan that does that instead of just saying, oh, yeah, we're just going to take this 600 and add it to this pile.
Right.
Well, what's the purpose of the pile? You know, we need to make sure we're having good, solid conversations that move the ball forward instead of just staying in the same place but really not moving forward at all. So again, if you've got information that you want to get from this website, obviously go into our landing page here where you've listened to this podcast. We'll have information and links to, you know, different areas where you can get more specifics on this stimulus bill. You can also go to planforeverything.com, get some information about us. If you're interested in talking about your finances and making good decisions, that's a place where you can schedule a time to sit down with us and you know, have some productive conversations and hopefully move you down the line closer to whatever your goals are. So we'll take a break. After that break, we'll talk about some more of the stimulus bill, but also some implications of how to use this money wisely. And that will be next on Back and Forth.
Are you nearing the age of retirement? Is your 401k not looking the way you'd hoped all those years ago? Retirement is supposed to be a time to relax, a time to live. Here at Blue Ridge Wealth Planners, we strive to provide that service and opportunity. We can help you form a plan that will maintain and grow your retirement savings so that you can achieve what you envisioned when you originally set out on this journey. To see where you sit and what you can do to stand again, visit planforeverything.com. That's planforeverything.com. Blue Ridge Wealth Planners. Let us plan for everything so you don't have to.
All right, welcome back. Back and Forth with Blue Ridge Wealth. Today we are talking about the stimulus bill, but also, some good parameters built around the payroll or Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, as many people commonly refer to it as. And so what are some things in that compared to the first go around? And I know you have kind of your own experiences there that you can speak to, but what improvements do you see under this new legislation that I think are benefit or that you would think are beneficial, moving forward?
I think it's important, like you said, to compare it to last time, because if you remember that PPP was passed and the funding, we didn't really know how to apply for it. People didn't know how to apply for it, and then applications went live and funding ran out within a week. Mm-hmm. They ran out of it immediately, and then we had to do a round two, and it was so the government has really learned from that experience. It seems like we'll see when this goes live, but is that they've kind of put more strict parameters on that because it was a free for all the first time. It was any business can apply for this and get 2.5 times payroll and go.
Yeah,
and so
no caps on revenues or so
they had some employee caps. I think if you had 500 or fewer employees, that's how you qualified. So So you rule out Apple, Amazon, Walmart.
You can have big business with less than 500 employees.
Exactly. So that was what was in the headlines is all these big companies, some of who were actually doing quite well during the pandemic, were taking the PPP because it was there, and they were getting priority over small businesses who really, really needed it. Yeah. And so now what we've seen is the government has come in and put some parameters on this to try to what seems like help small businesses who really need it the most. So we'll start with the biggest caveat is if you took the first round of PPP, you only qualify for this round of PPP if you have 1 quarter of revenue that was at least 25% less than it was a year ago. Right. So for most people, it's probably going to be in the second quarter because that's when we really saw the big shutdown. So if Q2 2020 revenue is 25% below Q2 2019 revenue, then you qualify. Yep. So that's really, obviously the target there is to help businesses who have seen a loss of revenue this year due to the pandemic. That's the biggest one. Other thing is they've decreased that employee count, so from 500 employees down to 300 employees. So now you have to have a business that has 300 or fewer employees. So now we're trying to get out of giving it to these giant businesses and really, like you said, you can have a big business with 300 employees as well, but they're just really trying to tighten that up and really target it towards the small businesses there. And one of the things that I also think kind of dovetails alongside that is they're trying to help sectors of the economy that were hardest hit. And so one of the things that they did is in the first round, it was just 2.5 times what your monthly payroll was. Now, that really is the baseline here. But if you're in the food and beverage industry, you get 3.5 times. So now you get more PPP for an industry that has been one of the hardest hits across the country. So they're trying to use all of these things in tandem to say, we want it to have sufficient funding, so we know kind of how much money we think we need to put into this, and we want it to go to businesses who have lost revenue, who are in a sector that's really hardest hit, and who are smaller than some of the businesses that got it before.
Yeah, and I think, too, one of the things that they put in there says maximum loan size for second-time borrowers is $2 million. So, right. It's both the employee cap, but also if you got low employees and huge profitability, right. It's putting a cap on that to where more of this $284 billion that was dedicated to that is going to be able to be spread around, whereas one large corporation with a few employees isn't going to take a significant portion of the bucket. So,
and they've streamlined the forgiveness and the loan application because, as we've said before, these loans are 100% forgivable if you use them for the right reasons. And so I believe if the loan amount is less than $15,000, both of those processes are streamlined, and they're now I think they're still debating this, but debating automatic forgiveness for smaller loan sizes.
I think 150
So, yeah,
is the
150,000. Yeah. So those things really take a lot of the strain off of banks, because what happened is not only were businesses trying to get all these loans, banks were trying to figure out how to give them.
Yeah.
They were like, we don't know how to give these loans. You remember I talked about this on the podcast before, as I was talking to Regions, and Regions was like, we don't know anything either.
Right.
So the government's tried to streamline a lot of those processes as well, so that not only are the loans going to the right companies, but we can effectively and efficiently get these loans into the hands of people who need them.
Yeah, which it goes to show, too, from a bigger picture, like giving money to something doesn't fix the problem. You know what I mean? Like the PPP before, the government was like, here's this big wad of cash. Banks, you figure out what to do with this, and we'll just leave you to it.
Right.
And then, so it's being somewhat strategic about how you give money to people can be very important, because like we have that conversation with our clients a lot about estate planning, where if you know that there's a problem and you don't do something about it, like it's kind of on you more than anybody else. Like when you're leaving money to your kids, if one of them is a drug addict and they're going to kill themselves if they get $500,000, you probably need to put some parameters around your estate planning to make sure they can't access that much money at one time. So I mean, it's putting those restrictions in place, not to be a problem, but to be able to be a benefit to whatever the situation is. And I think that they're doing that through this improvement on the PPP.
Yeah. And it's not going to be perfect. Just like we've said, there's a lot of valid criticisms out about it, but it's nice to see them kind of learn from the experience of the first round of this and tweak it to try to help and get it more targeted.
Yeah. I think one thing, too, I'll ask you what you feel like is maybe your – other than what we've talked about already, maybe your most impactful or what you think the best part of the bill is. But I think the one that it does a benefit to businesses, but also does a benefit to an area that's affected is, the deduction for business meals is now at 100%. So like if companies go out and get business meals through a restaurant, they have more tax incentive to do it to where they're not just getting half of that meal counted. That's not going to mean a lot to, like it says, estimated cost is about $5 billion to federal revenue. But I mean, if it promotes more businesses helping out an area that needs help, and being able to get deductibility for it, I think that's a very positive thing. And I know for us, like we do a lot of businesses or a lot of business with restaurants. So I think it'll be something where, it'll be a help to us, but also a benefit to the restaurants we use.
Right. No, that's great. I think one thing that I really like, and it's a small part of the bill, but just personally, is the $15 billion that goes directly to independent music venues and theaters and the entertainment industry, because that is an industry where I don't know when the next time I'll be able to go to a live concert is.
Right.
In a traditional way that I did 2 years ago. We don't know if that's going to be the second half of 2020, because those things take so long and so much planning. It's a really long process to get a musician to go on tour and get a concert going, or even get movies in the theaters again. That was we tried that earlier this year and it didn't really go well. So you saw Regal open their theaters up and immediately shut them back down. So those things, I think, when you are looking at this, and that's really targeted to small music venues and small entertainment venues and independent theater, that's really going to help a lot of these people who have put their life into a passion and a project, and through no fault of their own, they can't have concerts. So they've just been kind of stuck. And so I think that we see small things like that in this bill as well, where you can say, well, we sent a lot of money overseas and that's not good, but we also have this part of the bill that I think is targeted and really helps these people out.
Right. Yeah. And so as we look there, we do want to spend some time looking at kind of some effects of this. So I'll ask you from a market component, how do you see this stimulus bill affecting things both on the short and long term? I guess if you just more of an opinion, because I don't know that you researched that. But.
No, I've thought about it a lot. I don't think this impacts the markets at all. I think it already has.
Right.
Markets are at all-time highs. So I think that what always happens is, markets start, as soon as we start seeing that the stimulus bill has some momentum and markets just shoot up. That's what you can say. Oh, stimulus package, as of now, I don't think it will impact markets, but it already has. Yeah. Markets are at all-time highs. We're looking at now close to a 20% gain for the S&P 500 for 2020
Mm-hmm.
as we close out this year. That's crazy. But
Right.
as the stimulus does have a significant impact on why we're up that much this year.
And same, I'd say, for the vaccine as well,
Right.
just from the aspect of, post-election, the run-up that we saw was not because people were necessarily thrilled about, what happened in the White House,
Right.
but it was vaccine announcements plus stimulus bills, and those things compounding are giving kind of some gains in the market ahead of
Right.
the events actually taking place.
Yep, and I think there were we've joked about this, but there were 3 Mondays in a row. I think we had positive vaccine news each Monday, so we would open the week and markets would just shoot up.
Yeah.
And now here we are, just a little over a month later, and I know people who have gotten the vaccine.
Yeah.
So that was a very quick turnaround time. So markets were right. They were right to be excited about that because now we have people who have the vaccine.
Right. And so as we look at it, what to do with your stimulus bill, obviously right now, if you've got any kind of debt, especially credit card debt, which is just so like every other debt that you have could be refinanced and be at a lower rate. And you can do some things to where you can try to combine some credit cards and things. But it's just, you're not seeing any budging on those because they know that they've got people in a kind of precarious position there. So trying to pay down whatever debts that maybe have come from this coronavirus fallout that you have experienced, I think is huge. If you don't have any debt, bolstering your emergency savings so that you avoid going into debt for any further thing is going to be big, and not just blowing money because it's in your bank account, but actually trying to use it for what it can be beneficial for. Because, the amount of money that people have in emergency savings is not where it should be on across the board. And then if you've got plenty of money in the bank and you just have this money, trying to be strategic on how you want to invest this. It's maybe a little too late on Bitcoin run up, but trying to invest it for your future, so that you can get a use of this money and not leave it in a bank account, making zero interest right now, but trying to put it somewhere where it can have some positive growth potential to it, depending on obviously your investment needs. I think is going to be important as we look at it, just to make sure that, like we talked about at the close of our first half of the segment there, just being good stewards of what you have, is
Right.
we can't blame the government for being bad stewards of this money if we take the $600 they give us and we blow it.
Right.
That's very hypocritical. So we've got to make sure that we're holding up our end of the bargain and saying, yeah, we're using this for a good thing. And then as a reflection of that, then we can back up our good decisions with hopefully more good decisions in the
Right.
future. So again, anything to add or wrap up with, Zach, on stimulus bill or anything that we didn't talk about?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. It's interesting. This is anecdotal, but now we've seen 2 huge stimulus packages. So I do think that is somewhat encouraging to me. I think everybody wanted this one a lot sooner, but very encouraging to see that, like you said, if we're going to, a lot of people need help, and it's not perfect, but I would like to take the positive spin on it and say if the government is going to provide you all of these resources and all this assistance if you really need it, then I do think that's encouraging. And so watching this, like we said, it is not perfect, and there's a lot of things you can poke holes in, but
and hopefully move in the right direction.
Right.
And we'll see what else comes out. We're kind of making this a very timely thing. There could be more money on the way if Trump is right with the encouragement that he gave both sides of House and Senate there. So hopefully there's an attitude toward that, and hopefully more simplicity in some of these bills and less paper. So, but that's all we have for today. So again, any more information, you can go through info@blueridgewealth.com. If you have specific questions, you can also go to planforeverything.com, get more information about this show and other shows. And if you want to schedule a time where we can help you with financial conversations or questions that you have, feel free through planforeverything.com as well. But that's all we have for today. We'll see you next time on Back and Forth with Blue Ridge Wealth.
Investment advisory services offered through Blue Ridge Wealth Planners, a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Madison Avenue Securities, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC, MAS, and Blue Ridge Wealth Planners are not affiliated companies.